Hi, y'all. I'm John Blackburn, the barn expert.
Wild about barn.
Dear barn expert, Dawn Dowling from Louisiana wants to store hay in her barn, but the roof leaks. And the barn foundation was not built high enough, and it holds water when it rains. How can she fix these issues?
First, repair the leaky roof. I don't know where the water's coming. It's either coming from the roof, coming from around the barn, or whatever. You need to get the water out of the barn. So start with replacing the roof or patching the roof, whatever. It looks like it needs a fair amount of work, but I think what we're looking at is how do we get this adaptable without tearing it all down and starting over. So the first thing you need to do is do something around the barn to make sure that rainwater that's either coming off the roof or from around on your property that's sloping towards the barn to slope away from the barn. Now, if that's difficult, then the best way to do it, if you're on the side next to or near the bottom of a hill, and you have water coming down that hill, you need to create what's called a diversionary ditch. Somewhere on the side where that water's coming towards your barn, you need to divert that water away from your barn so it's not sitting there, it's not coming into the barn and creating problems, which can also be a health problems for your horses. Second is to solve the problems within the barn, and that is come by just pouring a 4-inch slab generally around within the floor, within the barn, putting some gravel into that for drainage, and then protecting the erosion around the barn so it doesn't erode the soil away, so you expose the edge of that slab.
Barn expert, should Dawn put a drain in the center of the barn aisle?
Dawn, after solving the water around the barn and the water and solving the floor issue in the barn, you may want to wonder, how do we get the water out of the barn that might be there? Whether you're washing the horse, washing the barn down, you can put a drain in there. Yours seems to be a fairly small barn. It might be simpler and cheaper to just drain it towards the door in some way. Now that can be in a larger barn, that can be a problem because you're creating mess outside the barn. But I'm trying to give you suggestions that it might be low cost. One is to slope the floor. It just has to slope what's called a 1/4 inch a foot, basically. And that way it doesn't pond, but it just slopes enough for it to drain away. And you can do that with concrete, and then you can put rubber mats on top. Or you can put a drain in the floor. And luckily what you don't need to worry about is when you have drains or water in the barn, you tend to get freezing. But in Louisiana, you don't have that problem. Lucky you. So take advantage of that and just let it drain to the outside and get it away from the barn as much as you can.
Barn expert, what should Dawn do about hay storage in the barn?
Dawn, you asked about hay storage in the barn. And my first suggestion to people is to not store hay in the barn, certainly large quantities of hay. Now, your barn is small, and you don't have a lot of animals that you're going to be stabling there, so I don't consider it a real problem to keep hay in the barn, but you want to be careful that you have enough room, and you're going to keep your animals away from it because it's going to be just torn up and messed up if they have access to it. So it really depends on your barn layout and how it works, and that I can't address without more photographs. But you can put hay storage in the barn. On larger barns and larger farms, I always tend to put hay stored elsewhere in bulk, and then I put what I call 7-day storage in the barn. And that way it's generally something that can be contained in a stall-size area and is not to the scale and size it becomes a fire hazard.
I hope that helps, Dawn. Thanks for your questions. Remember, send in your questions for our barn expert. Go to our website, wildaboutbarns.com, or send your photos and questions to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.